Welcome to Eclipse Horror Stories. If you're new here, this isn't just another horror channel. It's a community where we share the creepiest true stories, terrifying encounters, and mysteries that will keep you up at night. Every week, I bring you stories that feel so real, you'll question turning off the lights. If you love true horror stories, creepy forest encounters, and scary mysteries, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a night in the dark with us. Your support keeps these stories alive, and trust me, the scariest ones are still to come. When I first took the ranger job in Wyoming, I thought it would be all about fresh air, mountain views, and helping tourists find their way back to the visitor center. I didn't sign up for what I eventually saw out there. My assignment was in a remote part of the park, a stretch of wilderness so vast that you could hike for days without seeing another person. Out there, the forest seemed endless, and the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the trees were listening. On my first day, I was paired with two men who couldn't have been more different. The older one, Curtis, was the type you picture when you think of a ranger, gruff, gray-bearded, with a stare that made you straighten your posture without realizing it. He'd been in the service for decades and carried himself like he had already seen everything this forest could throw at him. The other ranger, Mateo, was younger but carried himself differently, quieter, thoughtful. He was Lakota, and while Curtis barked orders, Mateo spoke in low tones, almost as if the forest itself was listening in. We were sitting in the outpost when Curtis gave me the kind of welcome speech I expected. Watch for careless hikers. Keep an eye out for bears. Always carry a map, even if you've got GPS. He was practical, no nonsense. Then, after a pause, he leaned closer. But there are things out here, he said, that don't show up on any map. And if you hear something calling your name from the trees, don't answer. He left it at that, standing up to grab his gear as if he hadn't just dropped a bomb into the room. Mateo met my eyes and gave me a faint smile that didn't reach his face. "Don't mind Curtis," he said softly. "He doesn't like talking about it." But what he said, it's true. The first few days on patrol, nothing unusual happened. The trails were quiet, the weather clear. I checked permits, gave directions, reminded a family not to feed the wildlife. But even in those normal days, I felt something pressing at me from the woods. The trees here grew tall and close, their branches tangled like they were leaning over to listen. The silence would come on sudden, like the world holding its breath. On the fourth day, Curtis sent me to hike part of the North Ridge Trail with Mateo. We started early, the ground still wet from the night's rain. For hours, we saw nothing but deer tracks and the occasional hawk circling above. But near noon, Mateo stopped suddenly, crouched, and pointed at the mud. It looked like a boot print, but stretched too long, the heels sinking deeper than the rest. A person's stride, but wrong somehow, like they were carrying weight they shouldn't. I asked Mateo if it was just an old track, maybe warped by the rain. He shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "These are fresh." We followed them off the trail, down into a thick stretch of trees where the air felt colder, damp even though the sun was high. The prints grew deeper, dragging, like whatever we were following was stumbling. Then, as suddenly as they began, they stopped in a patch of moss. No turn, no sign of where they went. Just gone. I glanced at Mateo, expecting him to look confused. Instead, his face had gone pale. He whispered something under his breath in Lakota, a word I didn't know. Then he said to me, "We should go back." I was about to argue when I heard it. A voice, not close, but not far either, drifting through the trees. A woman's voice, thin and broken, calling for help. Mateo grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Don't answer," he said. The sound froze me in place. It was faint, but clear enough to make out the words. "Help me." The syllables floated between the trees, stretched out thin, as though they'd traveled a long distance to reach us. My first instinct was to shout back, but Mateo's grip tightened on my arm. His face was tense, eyes scanning the forest as if he expected something to step out at any moment. "It's someone out there," I whispered. Mateo shook his head. Not the way you think. His voice was low, careful, like he didn't want the forest itself to overhear him. Again, the voice came, this time from a different direction. Please help me. A little stronger, like whoever it was had taken a few steps closer. I turned in a circle, trying to pinpoint it, but the sound seemed to slip between the trees, always a few paces ahead. We can't just ignore it, I hissed. What if it's a hiker? Mateo looked at me, and I'll never forget the fear in his eyes. If it's a person, they're already gone. If it's not, he let the words hang. Still, my training and instinct screamed at me to follow. Curtis had said not to answer, but hearing someone call for help and doing nothing felt impossible. Against Mateo's warning, I pulled my arm free and started forward. He swore under his breath, but followed, his hand resting on the handle of his knife. The deeper we pushed into the trees, the quieter the forest grew. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of our boots on wet needles and the thin, pleading voice drifting just out of reach. After 10 minutes, my legs ached, and I realized we'd strayed far off the marked trail. Then, the smell hit us. Metallic, sharp, almost like rust. Mateo stopped short, and I saw it too. A patch of ground torn up, leaves stained dark. At first, I thought it was blood, but the soil seemed to drink it in, leaving the ground wet and black. Nearby, something white stuck out of the moss. I knelt and pulled it free. A scrap of fabric. Hiking gear. Torn at the edges and damp with the same dark stain. Someone was here, I said, my voice shaky. Mateo crouched beside me, running his fingers lightly over the ground. His face was grim. Something dragged them. He pointed to faint grooves in the soil, leading deeper into the trees, but the marks ended abruptly like they'd been swallowed. Before I could process that, the voice called again, louder now, and chillingly close. Help me. I spun, and for just a split second, I thought I saw her. A figure between the pines. A woman, long hair hanging over her face, hand raised as though reaching out. But when I blinked, she was gone. Mateo grabbed my shoulder and pulled me back hard. Don't look at it, he snapped. His voice shook, but his grip was firm. That's how it gets you. What is it? I demanded. He didn't answer right away. He just scanned the trees, his jaw tight, before finally saying, something older than these woods. My people have stories. The land remembers. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't hers. It was mine, my own voice, echoing back at me from the fog. This way, I felt the ground tilt under me, a wave of dizziness washing over my head. Mateo dragged me back, forcing me to focus. His voice was the only anchor. Don't listen. Don't follow. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. Whatever that thing was, it knew us now. It had our names. The sound of my own voice echoing from the fog left me cold. It wasn't just words. It carried the same rhythm, the same tone, as if I had spoken them a second ago. Mateo pulled me along, his grip iron tight, and whispered fiercely, "We're leaving." Now, we moved fast, retracing our steps as best we could, but the forest didn't look the same anymore. The trees seemed closer, the fog thicker, as though the trail had shifted while we weren't looking. I tried to keep calm, focusing on the crunch of pine needles under my boots, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the mist. But the silence pressed in like a weight. Then came the knocks. 3 sharp raps, steady and deliberate, from somewhere just behind us. I froze, my light swinging back. Nothing there, just rows of trees disappearing into white. Another 3 knocks, this time from the left. Mateo raised his knife, scanning the darkness. "It's playing with us," he muttered. I tried my radio, desperate for Curtis or anyone else at the outpost. Static filled my ears, but beneath it I thought I caught something. A whisper, my name again, stretched and broken. I snapped it off, all rising in my throat. We pressed on, but the knocks followed, echoing through the forest like a signal. Every few steps, another said, always shifting, always circling. My nerves were fraying, and I could see it in Mateo too, the way his shoulders hunched tighter with each sound. Then we stumbled into a clearing. At first, I thought it was a relief. Open ground, a chance to breathe. But as my light swept across the space, my stomach dropped. Bones, scattered across the moss and leaves, some gnawed, some broken, some still tangled with scraps of fabric. Hiking boots, a torn jacket, the bent frame of a backpack. "This is where it brings them," Mateo whispered. His voice was flat, almost resigned. Before I could answer, a shape moved at the edge of my vision. I swung the flashlight toward it, and for a heartbeat I saw it. Tall, impossibly thin, its skin stretched pale against the glow. Its head cocked unnaturally, eyes like pits that drank in the light instead of reflecting it. Then it melted back into the fog. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt locked. The knocks came again, louder now, pounding from the trees all around the clearing. Mateo stepped in front of me, knife raised, his voice steady but low. "Don't meet its eyes. Don't answer. Just move." We edged across the clearing, boots crunching on brittle bones. Every step felt like it would draw the thing out, like it was waiting for the right moment. I tried to keep my light steady, but my hand shook so badly the beam wavered. Then the voice came again, but not mine, not the women. This time it was Curtis. Clear as day. "Tom, Mateo, over here." For a split second, relief washed through me. Curtis had come looking for us. But then I remembered, Curtis was miles away, back at the outpost. And the voice hadn't come from ahead. It had come from inside the clearing, low and close, as if someone was crouched just behind the bones at our feet. I forced myself not to look. Mateo grabbed my sleeve, urging me forward, his face set in grim focus. We broke through the other side of the clearing, plunging back into the trees, and didn't stop until my lungs burned. The knocks faded behind us, but the silence that replaced them felt worse. Mateo finally stopped, chest heaving. He looked at me, his eyes dark. "Now you understand," he said quietly. "It knows us. It will keep following." We didn't talk much on the way back. Every sound felt sharper, every tree trunk like it was hiding a shadow just out of reach. My legs ached, and the weight of what we'd seen pressed heavy on me. But I forced myself to keep moving. The thought of that thing lurking behind us was enough to keep me going. When the outline of the outpost finally appeared through the fog, I felt a surge of relief. Curtis was on the porch, leaning against the railing with a mug in his hand. He straightened when he saw us, his eyes narrowing at the sight of our faces. "What the hell happened to you two?" he asked, setting the mug aside. I wanted to answer, to tell him everything, but the words tangled in my throat. Mateo stepped past me, his voice low but firm. "We found tracks. Then we found bones." Curtis's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he motioned us inside. The warmth of the small wood stove hit me as we entered, but it did nothing to ease the chill that had settled in my bones. "Start from the top," Curtis said. His voice was steady, but his hands fidgeted with his belt buckle. So we told him. The prints, the voice in the trees, the clearing with the bones. The figure we'd seen, too thin, too tall, moving wrong. By the time we finished, Curtis had gone pale. "I told you not to answer," he muttered, almost to himself. "You knew," I said, anger bubbling under my fear. "You knew something like this was out there, and you didn't warn us?" Curtis looked at me hard. "You wouldn't have believed me if I had. No one ever does." Mateo spoke up then, quieter but more certain. "It's the mimic. The stories my grandfather told, they said it was old, older than the land itself. It doesn't just kill. It toys with you, learns you, wears your voice like a mask. Once it knows your name, it never lets go." The words made my skin crawl. I remembered hearing my own voice out there, calling from the fog, urging me to follow. Curtis rubbed a hand over his face. "We'll set a watch tonight. Keep the fire high. It won't come close if it knows we're ready." That night, we sat in shifts by the fire outside the outpost. The flames flickered, sending sparks into the dark, and the forest pressed close on all sides. My turn came after midnight, and I tried to keep my eyes on the trees, my ears straining for any sound beyond the crackle of the fire. It didn't take long. The knocks came again, steady and deliberate. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Another 3, closer this time. My hand tightened around the rifle Curtis had shoved at me earlier. Then a voice called out, "Tom." It was my mother's voice. Soft, familiar, impossible. My chest tightened, and for a split second, I almost stood, almost called back. But then Mateo's words echoed in my head. Once it knows your name, it never lets go. The voice called again, pleading now. "Tom, please, come here." I forced my eyes on the fire, gripping the rifle until my knuckles ached. The knocks circled the outpost, always just beyond the light. I could feel it watching, waiting for me to slip. Curtis stepped out then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He froze when he heard the voice too, his face going ashen. It shifted now, turning into his voice. "Curtis, help me." Curtis muttered a curse under his breath, his grip tightening on the revolver at his side. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw fear break through his tough exterior. "It's getting bolder," he whispered, "and it's close." We didn't speak much on the way back. Words felt dangerous, like they could draw the thing closer. I kept my eyes on Mateo's back, following his sure steps through the fog until finally the outline of the trail appeared beneath our boots again. Relief hit me so hard my knees nearly gave. By the time we reached the outpost, the sun was low, burning red between the ridges. Curtis was waiting by the porch, a cigarette in hand, looking irritated. When he saw our faces, his expression shifted. "What the hell happened out there?" he asked. Mateo didn't answer right away. He just dropped the torn fabric we'd found on the porch. Curtis bent, picked it up, and frowned at the dark stain. "That's fresh," he muttered. Then his eyes flicked to mine. "What did you hear?" I hesitated. Admitting it out loud felt like giving it power, but I said it anyway. "A woman's voice. Then mine. And yours." Curtis cursed under his breath, grinding the cigarette out beneath his boot. "I told you not to answer." "I didn't," I said quickly, but it followed us anyway. Mateo finally spoke, his tone grim. "It knows us now. It won't stop." The weight of his words sank into me. Curtis ran a hand down his face, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I've been through this before," he said quietly. "Not here, but in another forest. Same signs. Same damn thing. Thought I left it behind." That night, we barred the doors and kept the lamps burning. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the cabin set my nerves on edge. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of someone walking just outside, slow, heavy steps crunching the gravel. Curtis was already up, rifle in hand, motioning for me to stay quiet. Mateo sat rigid by the window, his knife across his lap. The steps circled the cabin once, twice. Then came a knock on the door. 3 steady raps. My heart jumped. Curtis raised the rifle, nodding for me to keep still. The knock came again, louder. Then a voice, clear and calm. "Mine. It's me. Let me in." I froze. Curtis's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower the rifle. Mateo leaned close and whispered, "It's testing you." Another knock. This time it was Curtis's voice. "Open up. It's safe." The sound of his own voice made Curtis flinch. His grip on the rifle faltered for a second, but he steadied it again, muttering a curse. Then, without warning, something slammed into the side of the cabin. The walls shook, dust falling from the rafters. A deep scrape followed, claws raking across the wood. The lamps flickered, shadows dancing wildly. "It's trying to get in," I whispered, my throat dry. Curtis's eyes were locked on the door. "It won't stop unless we make it." The thing circled again, pounding the walls hard enough that the glass panes rattled. Then silence. We waited, breath shallow. I thought maybe it had left. But then, from just outside the window, came a sound that turned my stomach inside out. It was Daniel's voice. Daniel Black Elk, the ranger who'd died years before I ever came here. I'd heard about him from Curtis in passing. The creature spoke in his tone, his rhythm, calling Mateo's name softly. Mateo's face drained of color, his hand tightening on the knife. The knock came again, so hard the doorframe shuddered. This time, the voice wasn't anyone's I recognized. It was something raw, deep, stretched like a growl forcing itself into words. Curtis stepped forward, rifle aimed. "Get ready," he said. "It's not leaving." The air felt heavy, the night pressing in, waiting for the next strike. The silence after that last knock was worse than the pounding. It was the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle when you know something is still there but waiting. Curtis kept his rifle leveled at the door, his eyes locked, every muscle in his body strung tight like a wire. Mateo whispered something in Lakota under his breath, low and steady, like a prayer. Then the window beside him shattered. Glass sprayed across the room as a pale arm, long and thin, shot through the opening, claws raking deep gouges into the wall. Mateo rolled away just in time, the knife clattering to the floor as the thing's hand snapped shut on empty air. Curtis fired. The blast echoed so loud my ears rang, the muzzle flash lighting up the cabin for a split second. The arm jerked back, vanishing into the night with a sound that made my stomach twist. A high, keening wail that was almost human, but not quite. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the whole cabin shook. Something heavy slammed against the side, rattling the lamps, knocking a chair over. Another slam, harder. I grabbed the knife off the floor and backed toward the corner, my pulse hammering in my throat. "It's not scared of us," I said, my voice shaking. Curtis reloaded fast, his jaw tight. "It should be." Before he could fire again, the roof groaned. Dust rained from the beams as heavy steps crawled across the top. We stared upward, every board creaking under its weight. Then claws tore straight through the shingles, punching down toward us. Mateo lunged, grabbing the lantern from the table. He struck a match with trembling hands and lit it, holding the flame high. The thing above us hissed, an awful, rasping sound, and scrambled back, the roof creaking under its retreat. "Fire," Mateo said, his voice harsh. "It hates fire." Curtis nodded once, grim. "Then we give it fire." We threw every scrap of wood into the stove, the flames roaring higher, the heat making the cabin stifling. For a moment, the scratching stopped, and I dared to hope it was over. But then the door burst inward. The hinges snapped, wood splintering as the thing forced its way inside. I saw it fully then, lit by the stove's fire. Taller than any man, its limbs stretched too long, skin hanging loose and pale. Its eyes were black pits, wide and unblinking, and its mouth, God, its mouth, stretched far too wide, lined with teeth that didn't look like they belonged to a human or an animal. Curtis fired again, the shot slamming into its chest. It staggered but didn't fall. Instead it shrieked, the sound so sharp it cut through me like glass. Mateo shoved the lantern forward, throwing burning oil across its arm. Flames licked its skin, and for the first time it recoiled, thrashing against the walls. The cabin filled with the stench of burning hair and something sour, like rotting meat. "Push it out," Curtis yelled. He charged forward, ramming the butt of his rifle into its side. I followed, stabbing wildly with the knife, not even sure I hit anything. Together we forced it back through the doorway, the flames biting at its pale flesh. It shrieked again, retreating into the dark, the sound carrying far into the trees. Then it was gone. We stood in the wreckage, the firelight flickering over shattered glass and splintered wood. My hands shook so hard I dropped the knife, my knees nearly giving out. Mateo's lantern had gone out in the struggle, and Curtis leaned heavy against the wall, his rifle empty. But the worst part wasn't the damage. It was knowing that thing hadn't been beaten. Just push back. Curtis looked at us, sweat dripping down his face. "It'll be back," he said. His voice was flat, like he knew exactly what came next. And he was right. The cabin smelled of smoke and blood. My ears still rang from the gunfire, and every muscle in my body ached from the struggle. For a long while, none of us spoke. We just stood there, listening to the silence beyond the broken door, waiting for the sound of claws scraping the walls again. When it didn't come, I thought maybe, just maybe, we had bought ourselves some time. But then I saw Curtis slump against the wall, his hand pressed tight against his side. Dark red seeped through his fingers. "Curtis," I breathed, rushing to him. "You're hurt." "Claws got me," he said through gritted teeth. His face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple. Not as bad as it looks, but the way his voice wavered betrayed him. Mateo knelt beside him, tearing strips from his shirt to press against the wound. "It's deep," he muttered. "We need to stop the bleeding." Curtis caught his wrist, shaking his head. "Don't waste your time. I've seen what happens when it scratches you. It's not just a wound." The words chilled me. "What do you mean?" His eyes met mine, sharp and unblinking despite the pain. "It marks you. You don't get better from it. You change." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the way he said it, flat, certain, told me he'd seen it before. Maybe even watched someone go through it. The fire in the stove crackled, throwing long shadows across the cabin. Every creak of the wind outside made me flinch. Mateo worked quickly, binding Curtis's side anyway, refusing to accept his words. But the older man was fading fast, his breathing shallow. Then we heard it. The knocks again. Slow, deliberate. This time, not on the walls. On the roof. Mateo's head snapped up, eyes wide. "It's not done with us." Curtis pushed himself up with a groan, gripping his rifle though his hands shook. "You two need to run," he rasped. "Get to the tower. Radio for help. I'll hold it off." "No," I said immediately. "We're not leaving you here." But Curtis gave me a look that cut straight through my protest. It wasn't anger. It was resignation. A man who knew his time had already run out. The roof groaned again, claws dragging slow lines across the shingles. Dust fell from the rafters. Then a voice came, my voice, speaking from just above. "Mateo, open the door." My stomach dropped. Hearing myself call to him like that, so calm, so familiar, twisted something deep inside me. Mateo's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. Curtis staggered to his feet, bracing against the wall. "Go. Now." While it's focused on me, the thing outside scraped its claws again, harder, almost as if it could sense the tension inside. My chest tightened with panic. If we stayed, we'd all die. If we left, we'd be abandoning him. Mateo stood, torn, his eyes flicking between me and Curtis. Finally, he gripped my shoulder. "We have to move. It's what he wants." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes, but Curtis barked at me, his voice sharp even through the pain. "Don't waste this, kid. Get out." The decision was ripped from us when the roof gave way. Boards splintered, and a pale, clawed hand punched through, reaching down. Curtis roared, raising the rifle one last time. "Run!" The shot thundered through the cabin, and Mateo yanked me toward the door. I looked back once, just long enough to see Curtis standing in the firelight, defiant even as the shadow above swallowed him whole. Then we were out in the night, sprinting into the trees, the forest swallowing the cabin, and Curtis behind us. We ran until my lungs burned, branches whipping at my arms and face, the night pressing in from all sides. Mateo led the way, never slowing, never looking back, even though every instinct screamed that the thing was behind us. I didn't dare glance over my shoulder. I knew if I did, I'd see it there, keeping pace in the shadows. The air was thick with smoke and an acrid tang that reminded me of blood and rust. Somewhere ahead, a faint glow pierced the darkness, the watchtower. We'd made it. That was the plan. Reach the tower, radio for help, and escape whatever hell we'd stumbled into. But as we broke into a clearing, I saw it wasn't empty. The base of the tower was littered with twisted shapes. Broken gear, scraps of fabric, and worse, shredded bones, some still clinging to ragged flesh. The sight made my stomach turn. Mateo slowed, his breath sharp in the cold night air. He glanced up at me, then at the tower. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "It's a trap," he muttered, but his voice barely carried over the pounding of my heart. Before I could reply, a slow, wet scraping echoed from behind us. I froze. Mateo's hand shot toward my arm. "We don't have time," he hissed, pulling me toward the ladder that led up the tower. My boots crunched on broken wood as we climbed, each rung groaning under our weight. At the top, the wind was colder, sharper. The platform offered a view of the forest, a black sea of swaying shapes. Somewhere deep within it, something moved. Not like an animal, but like a shadow with purpose. The radio crackled in my pocket, but the signal was weak. Only static answered when I pressed the button. "Mateo," I said, my voice shaking. "We need a plan." He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the tree lean, his jaw tight. "Curtis was right," he said quietly. "It marks you. Whatever it is, it wants more than flesh." A sudden thud against the tower made both of us jump. The sound came again, harder, closer. Then a voice, my voice, calling my name, low and drawn out, like a whisper from a dream. My blood ran cold. Mateo grabbed my arm. "We're not safe here. We need to leave." I glanced over the edge. The forest below was impossibly still now, except for something moving just at the edge of sight. The thing, whatever it was waiting, watching, patient. "On three," Mateo said. His voice was steady now, but I could hear the fear underneath. We counted. 1, 2, 3. We climbed down. The ladder rattled under us, and I nearly lost my grip. Mateo was ahead, pulling me forward. At the bottom, the forest seemed to close in tighter. The air was thick with an unnatural hush. Then, before we could even take a step, something slammed against the tower above us. The wood groaned, splintered, and a long, clawed shadow descended. Mateo grabbed my hand, pulling me into the trees. "Run," he shouted. We ran blindly, branches tearing at our clothes, the world reduced to breath and pain. Behind us, a sound like metal on bone echoed through the darkness. Then the whisper again, my voice, calling me. Calm, familiar, wrong. We stumbled into a clearing and stopped. Mateo gasped for air, but I felt something heavier, an instinct deep inside me, pulling me toward the noise. The voice was closer now, just beyond the trees, soft and inviting. Mateo gripped my shoulder. "Don't listen," he said, but I couldn't look away. The forest was silent now, too silent. Then a clawed hand broke the shadow, reaching for me. I screamed. Mateo screamed. And then there was nothing but darkness.